Welcome back to Industry Conversation. Today we'll be speaking with the Managing Director and Group Chief Executive Officer of Verdant Zeal Communications Limited, Dr. Tunji Olugbodi. Glad to have you join us on the program, sir.
Pleasure is entirely mine.
All right,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, so I know that you are a leader and industry icon, and I wanted to start today's interview with your assessment of the outcome here. Now, tell us what is your assessment of the integrated marketing, communications, and advertising space so far?
Well, thank you. Obviously, 2023 was a very challenging year. If you look at the macroeconomics, it's everything headed south. Look at the issue of the FX regime. Look at the issue of government's ability to meet up with their own responsibilities, especially fiscal responsibilities. Look at the issue of security. Look at the issue of infrastructure. All of these tended to make the cost of business significantly higher. The unpredictability also impacted negatively with a lot of the clients who in turn went into survival mode, especially when you look at the issue of FX. The repercussion of that reverberated across several areas of concern. For instance, the supply chain. They had long inventories that they could not meet up, they could not get out of the pipeline. The market itself became very restive because, again, people were basically in survival mode, again, because of the very high inflation. It wasn't just a double-digit inflation, they kept pricing from quarter to quarter. And, all of that also germinated amongst what you can call political challenges, because again, there was no clarity in terms of the kind of leadership structure, political leadership structure, that you could say, okay, all right, yes, we do have challenges, but this is the direction to go, and this is what will take us to El Dorado. There's just suspicion all over the place. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, it makes planning very difficult. It makes projection very difficult. And of course, you do understand that in that kind of situation, the first thing that gets impacted is your advertising spend. So people are not likely to advertise when they can't even get rid of their inventory, and when they have challenges with supply chain, with manufacturer, and so on and so forth. So we were the worst hit, I think, of many sectors. So when I say we, I mean the advertising and promotion and integrated marketing industry was the worst hit. But you see, the thing is also that whether we like it or not, all of that is happening in the midst of even global changes, that we could not wish away. So it makes it a lot more complex, because not just an isolated thing in Nigeria. A lot of economies are challenged, very slow growth, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and even in some places in the West. I mean, even the UK and a host of others are going through different kind of challenges. That also brings out is the fact that whatever happens in one small corner of the world seems to impact the rest of the world. So because now we play a much more global game than we used to play. So in sum total, yes, we do have challenges in 2023. What I think took us through is the resilience that we typically find in ourselves as Nigerians, and the fact that we always remain very optimistic even when we are faced with the most dire challenges. But coming out of 2023, I think it's clear that we are not likely to have a quick fix, a quick answer to those challenges. So they're still going to be here with us in 2024. How soon and how quickly we get out of it will be a combination of approaches, not least which will be the leadership that is provided by government, and of course the faith that we also show in operating the economy.
Okay, great. So you highlighted some of the challenges, and you mentioned survival mode. And I remember that last year there were exits of some of giant brands. We had the likes of GSK and PNG exiting Nigeria. Now, what would you say is the impact of this incessant exit from the Nigerian brand space, and what does this mean for consumers and other brands that are still in Nigeria?
I think first is the need for us to be careful in terms of how we define such exits. What you find in the case of GSK and in the case of P&G is really that they took a corporate decision, not just in Nigeria, not just in Africa, but in other parts of the world, modifying the way they do business. All right. And I guess that part of the reason for that is also that they're taking the medium to long-term view of how their businesses can perform better. More and more people are realizing the just-in-time approach to manufacturing. That when you do manufacturing and you have huge warehouses and you have long standard operating processes that tend to make your product either more expensive or delays its getting to the end market, then it has its own implications. My sense is that that's the reason why GSK and P&G, for instance, went the way of focusing more on retail and changing their distributive network, because they need to remain very competitive in the markets where they operate. But coincidentally, in an environment like ours, and that happening, people automatically make the allusion to the fact that, oh, it's because of the challenges in the economy is the reason why they are leaving. That may be true, but only true to some extent. I thought to provide some kind of clarity on that. My second view about this is also that things have become a lot more dynamic. Take the issue of migration, for instance. The kind of migration we have today is different from the kind of migration you had in the 60s and early 70s, where, for instance, people move because they want to have better knowledge. They want to improve on their education. So they go to the West to study and then they move back. The kind of migration you have today, again, goes back to survival migration or to what I call instinctive migration. Survival migration is that compels people to move from one point to the other because of safety, because they want a better life, because they want better opportunities for themselves, for their family, for their children. So they will do anything it takes to be able to move from that point A to point B. Again, the general notion is that people move from Africa and challenged third world countries to places in the West. That might be so, but people have also been known to move from areas, even within countries, even within nation states, to places where they can find better security. Now, the implication of this, by extension, is that it's made things a lot more dynamic in the sense of the lifestyle choices that people make, the way people assess what they pay for and how they pay for it, in terms of products, goods, and services, the way they consume information, for instance, through media and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to bring out of this is the fact that because things have become very dynamic, things are very, very fluid, what you find is that the options that tend to meet the need states of people have also become very, very fluid. So that impacts the way people take decisions, and to that extent, what they pay for in goods and services. So again, what it speaks to is the fact that as manufacturers, you must always be able to put a gauge on the mood and mindset of the market. Because if you don't, then you'll be working at variance. So in a situation where you have very high inflation, in a situation where you have very limited purchasing power, in a situation where there's insecurity and you cannot honestly guarantee what's going to happen a few weeks down the line, people have tended to live more, if you like, from day to day. They just take each day as it comes, and they want to make the best of each day. So what that presupposes is that the notion of luxury is reduced, maybe significantly, and because it's survival mode, they would then look at the hierarchy of needs and say, what are the most important things for me that I need? So it will be food, shelter, clothing, obviously maybe not necessarily in that order, but those would be the key considerations. And what am I willing to pay for these things in exchange for the comfort or the need that I require, and what I can afford to offer. So if I take it back to the issue of things like companies like P&G and GSK, then you start to understand that alternative brands are gaining ground because what used to be dominant brands that spoke or speak to the taste of people at a certain level is no longer relevant. Not when you are in transition mode, not when you are in constant motion, not when you are very fluid in terms of, okay, what will tomorrow bring? I hope you're getting what I'm saying. So those things means that brands that used to have the comfort of a certain high ground are no longer comfortable. They can no longer sit idle because they will constantly be challenged by value for discount brands. Now, I don't want to say cheaper, brands that meet the need states of people where they are, brands that speak to their cultural identity. So if you go back to the issue of migration that I spoke about, for instance, I imagine that in most places in the West, and that happens a lot, even when I travel, the first thing I'm looking for is, where can I get Nigerian food?
That's
So in
true.
places where you did not have a high concentration of Nigerians before, that might be difficult to come by. But I like to wager that in many places all around the globe now that you have a lot of Nigerians where they migrated to, Nigerian food has become,
Available.
available. So if you look at that from the perspective of opportunity and from the perspective of the kind of change and dynamism that's come into play, you then still need to start understanding why migration has become an integral part of what we experience today and something that has become inevitable as part of the as part of the vehicles that bring the change. Part of what migration also brings to the fore is the fact that culture will become a lot more diluted and mixed. Lifestyle will become a lot more pronounced. And that's why you then find this renaissance happening all over the place, where it's first generation, second generation, or third generation Nigerians, wherever they are. People will speak to the identity that demonstrates the originality in their culture. So there's a lot of spin-offs that comes from all of these things. But I think for us as marketeers and as marketing organizations, whether on the client side or, it's really for us to remain very, very adaptable, understanding the trends as they change, monitoring it, and looking for the opportunities that continue to emerge on a daily basis.
Okay, great. So you almost answered my next question. So you highlighted some of the challenges that marketeers and brands and organizations faced last year, and you mentioned resilience as some of the things that helped pull through last year. Now, what are the strategic moves you think brands, and both on the client side, on the brand side, what are the strategic moves they can make to ensure that in 2024 they move from survival to being significant, or sort of stay afloat and be buoyant?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, how do you gain critical mass? I think that should always be the question. So in gaining critical mass, it means that you have to follow the money. Following the money means that you have to go to where money is spent. Going to where money is spent means that you have to know where and how people congregate.
Okay.
Knowing how people congregate means that you have to understand the mindset and the mentality that makes them to congregate, because they need connectivity, they need communication, they need community. So your task as a marketing person, as a marketer, will be to understand those evolving communities, to understand the meaningful connections that they're creating, and to understand how communication has become an essential part of how they need to interact. I think if you do that, if you understand those things, then you'll be able to readapt your products, your services to those emerging needs, because they keep changing, and that's the truth. And I think it's the same reason why people try to delineate by saying there's a Gen Z, there's a millennial, and now there's what's the new one?
Is it Gen X?
No, I think it's is it Gen alpha, is it alpha now? So again, those are nomenclatures that can stick. But the thing to note is that there's a general thread that holds us together as human beings, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from. So it's really to understand those fundamentals. When you understand those fundamentals, you will know how money is spent. Now, in concrete terms, the things that will change or that are changing is that um, people's people's orientation is usually tied to their identity or what they love to be identified with. All right, which can speak to what can be intentional. And you remember I spoke about this initially when I talked about intentional migration. So people can decide that because I have the means to pay for a new passport, I can become a citizen of um, any of the Caribbeans tomorrow, and that gives me access to 90 countries that I don't need to pay for a visa or to apply for a visa. Now that's intentional. The other migration I talked about in terms of people being forced to move because they don't have a choice. So consumer consumer attitude is very, very important. And I figure that the reason why consumer rights are becoming more and more significant is also, like I talked about, the critical mass. When people spend in the critical mass, it becomes very vital to the survival of industries. So everything and anything that makes commerce possible is what we must focus on. When America was challenged in 2008 to 2010, thereabout, you remember what Obama did? They spend a lot of money on infrastructure just to make sure that there are jobs that are created, including even building bridges that were not necessarily priority. And that's part of the reason why you could come out of a depression. I think it's the same thing that needs to apply in this kind of situation where we need to have structures, institutional structures that guarantee that enough commerce is being generated for people to remain active in terms of buying and selling. If we don't have that going on, the restrictions will mean the inevitable death of some industries because they will just continue to struggle. And again, what we're saying is that economic fortunes are not necessarily tied um, to to mineral wealth, for instance. It's a matter of how do you manage the fundamentals, that helps you to be able to spin off a good life for your citizens. I'll say in that respect, we have not been very lucky as a nation, and perhaps as a continent. And that remains an area of challenge for us, a fundamental challenge for us in terms of providing visionary leadership that will ensure that all the assets that we have, the mineral resources that we have, the blessings of nature that we have, are utilized in such a way that it provides at least a good life for a larger number of people. So going back to your question specifically, what are the things we need to do? One is to make sure that there are institutional structures that guarantee commerce. All right. Two, that we have a commitment to providing a conducive environment for consumers to thrive. Three, to make sure that the fundamentals of macroeconomics, or economy they are addressed. So when you look at the FX regime, there's no nation that will have 2-3 windows that will survive. So even with all the adjustments that government is trying to do, people still talk about parallel markets. Go to Dubai, for instance, for as long as I can remember, 15, 16, 20 years, the exchange rate in Dubai and the UAE has remained the same. It's 3.66, 3.67 to the dollar. So what that means is that you can predict what your assets can bring you in 5 years, in 10 years, because the volatility is completely nil, because there's just one single window. So a lot of forward-looking governments and economies know that if you don't address this as a fundamental, all the other elements will remain, basically um, a mirage. The same thing with issues that has to do with security. Now we see, pardon my French, I think sometimes a very half-hearted approach to addressing the issues of security. Now, security is not, it's not a unidirectional thing. It has a lot of elements embedded in it. And so it's not something you just throw money at. It's really something that you need to address with the right kind of strategy, the right kind of partnership, the right kind of collaboration, and the right kind of spirit. But again, when you have disparities in how all this is are being executed, and it leaves room for people to be able to exploit the situation, then it's become an industry on its own. All right, so you probably have a situation where the issue of security will remain a recurring decimal, because the very people who are supposed to address it and clear it once and for all are actually benefiting from it. So again, there's no way our economy can grow or improve, whether you're talking of local investment or foreign direct investment, if security is not there. Look again at institutions when you talk about law and order. The most basic things that help any economy to grow, one of the most fundamental is law and order. So you get into Dubai, for instance, and you can almost be certain that if you lose anything, you'll find that thing. Why? Because, and I always talk about this personally, it's a virtual police state. Yeah, because no matter who you are and where you come from, they can almost pinpoint who you are and where you are at any point in time. Okay. Now, some people think it's extreme, but what it also guarantees is the fact that the incentive for people to try to play smart is very reduced. So you know that, in this environment, you cannot, if you do anything that's untoward, you're likely to be caught and punished for it. Now, it's different from an environment where anything goes, where people do whatever they like. So there's no way you can guarantee growth within that kind of chaos, when simple basic rules like obeying traffic laws are not respected.
That was absolutely well said. Now let's talk about trends. Now I know that last year there was like a surge of trends, that fueled the entire industry. Now, what do you think are some of those trends that will persist this year, and what are the drives that would make to drive success in this year?
I think the thing to understand about trends is they are fast, so they come and they go, and they really don't endure. And so that makes it very opportunistic. And frankly, I won't always recommend people who have medium to long-term views about their business planning and projections to always just look at trends, because it's very opportunistic. So to that extent, it's restrictive in the kind of opportunities that it also brings. All right, so some of the trends we saw last year, I like to imagine trends in entertainment, for instance, trends in terms of lifestyle, trends in terms of, like I was trying to explain, the options that are pushed on us because of the very inclement environment that we operate. Those trends will change when the fortunes change. So personally, I'm one to say, if the line of business you choose is geared towards taking opportunity of trends because you're able to monitor it and quickly grow on it, then that's fine. But if it's not, then don't follow trends because it's a trend thing, because trends just come and goes. So it's not meant for everyone. Let's be specific. Look at trends that has to do with fashion. So there are certain things that either go and they're coming back, or they're coming back and they're going. Just from the top of my head, for instance, I see a lot more people use the mask these days. Now, the mask used to be something that we used to use a long time ago because it's very stiff, shows reality, shows aristocracy. Now it's coming back. For how long it will come back for use, nobody knows. I'm just giving that as one example of what obtains in lifestyle. Other trends that you can talk about in more realistic terms would be in terms of purchasing, consumer orientation towards purchase. All right. So are people able to still buy in bulk like they used to? I don't think so. I don't think so, because again, what you found last week for 3,000 naira, if you go back there this week, is 6,000 naira. Yes. So if you buy in bulk, it means that you have more than enough to be able to retain that purchasing power. But that's not the case of the majority. So as a trend, what you found is that, again, I speak about that most survival mode. You look at your list of shopping items and say, of these 10 items, which are the 5 most important to me? And how do I extend the use? So, but that said, trends are still important because they reflect the mood and mindset of people, of the consumers at any point in time, and might be indicative of what direction you are going. Because again, the spending pattern, the purchase pattern, where you buy from, how you buy, because also reflects the fortune within the larger economy.
Okay, so let's talk about premiumization as a trend. Now, do you see premiumization as a trend to gather pace in the new year amidst of, the inflation, threatening consumers' purchasing power?
Only to a limited extent. And why do I say so? Again, you look at the aggregate of people whom you are trying to premiumize or premiumize a particular product or service for. And if you are looking at it from the point of view of numbers, when an economy is challenged in the country of 220 million people, I'm not too sure that even your display, let's even say you want to go premium totally, your display of ostentatious wealth is advisable. So you'll always have some restriction about that. So I'm not too sure that it is totally justifiable, but please don't get me wrong. Depending on the kind of brands or products that you offer, you will need to inevitably delineate and delineation from your premiumization, like you talked about, is actually about segmentation. All right. You will inevitably need to segment because people's need state has changed. And unless you're able to identify what I'll call the epicenter of your target, to be able to target them more, the 80-20 principle, then you just be running around like a headless chicken. So what you call premiumization for me will be, how do you achieve even greater segmentation to be able to understand why your brand needs to optimize its fortune in the market space. And we're seeing that trend more and more with a lot of even big brands. They are doing spin-offs of what I can call legacy names and legacy brands. So one brand can spin off 3 different variants just so that they can meet more people who might capture more people. And then they made the cost of production, lesser, the cost of distribution lesser, so that again people don't need to pay more because they have more variants and more spin-offs that are coming through. Of course, because again it's a challenge economy, you have all sorts of spin-offs and copycats, so all sorts of wannabes. And it's a reason why NAFDAC is fighting an uphill task, because a lot of adulterated brands are in the market that are just trying to mimic the real choices that people are making. So for me, yes, some brands will be able to premiumize or premiumize their products, but it's a very restrictive market. Of course, it's a very niche market. But it's really more about delineation and identifying your core target that you need to speak to. And if you go back to what I said about building a community, having conversations going on, ensuring that they have meaningful connections, that's where these things become much more important. So people are not just creating brands that people should buy and interact with because I just want to drink or eat. They're creating brands that they want to be able to create shared experiences. So a lot of the times they want to hear from you. What do you think about the brand? How do you feel about it? And so on and so forth, so that people of like minds they also get to talk about those brands. So in some total, for me, it's about, yes, you do have challenges, but don't forget that, it's when you have challenges that actually have more opportunities. And the numerical strength we have as a nation can never, never, never let things go to waste. 220 million people on the face of any part of the earth is a lot, is significant. China became what it has become today by actually focusing about 300 million people that were the core middle class. to be able to build just not just their own consumer markets, consumer economy, but also to be able to then become the manufacturing hub for the world.
Wow. Okay, so I know that you have experience in various sectors, including the entertainment industry. Now, I want to ask, based on your experience, what is your assessment of the Nigerian entertainment industry?
Nigerian entertainment industry offers a lifeline to a lot of sectors. That's what I'll say. To a lot of sectors. If you want to break it down, if you look at music, if you look at cinema or movies, if you look at um, traditional culture, if you look at fashion, there's a new sense of renaissance about Nigeria and Nigerian culture and Nigerian entertainment and Nigerian music all around the globe. All right. So when I say creates opportunities, it's a lifeline actually for us. And that lifeline comes from the fact that, number one, increasingly we have a captive market around the globe where our music have gone mainstream. Number two, we have a captive audience around the world where our movies are going more and more mainstream. Number three, we have situations where because of those opportunities, a lot of the way we do things are improving. So if you look at things like production quality, it's being enhanced greatly. Number four is also that because most of these are organic to us, the way we've developed and evolved has been through the very difficult hardship experience, not through what in the West, will be a much more easy approach to be able to get things done. So the spin up to all of this in all those industries that there are very many subsets that creates opportunities for us to be able to move out and, so to say, spread the gospel of what we are doing. So under music, you have producers, you have writers, you have choreographers, you have dancers, you have a production crew, you have people who are managing assets. There's a lot that can do that because, again, it's gone mainstream. If you look at the movies, the same thing. If you look at fashion, the same thing. Fashion, you have makeup people, you have hairdressers, you have uh, people who manage
Designers
wardrobes,
as well.
so many things that can spin off. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the Nigeria is no longer just a market. The globe is actually the market. So for people who are forward-looking and who are very strategic in their thoughts and approach to business, they can actually ride on the crest of this kind of opportunities all around the globe. All around the globe. Again, unfortunately for me, it's also that this kind of things require a savvy political leadership to understand the potentials and to be able to frontline this in a way that can make us relevant within the world. And it will speak to things like how do you manage the perception and the positioning of the average Nigerian around the globe. So what people see and hear of us will not and should not always be the negative. All right, it should be how are we pushing the plus points and benefits of what we bring to the world in terms of entertainment. So for me, as a marketing practitioner, I see a lot of opportunities in entertainment. You do premieres now that most often are not the people who are very versatile in filmmaking and not necessarily versatile when it comes to managing premieres. They just do it their own way. All right, so premieres should go beyond, oh, okay, what are you wearing for the night? And then you just take pictures. It has to get to the stage where we're using it to change the narrative and to speak to certain agenda all around the globe in terms of the language, in terms of the nuance, in terms of the orientation, in terms of the people that we engage to do the spin-offs. Now, if you look at music, for instance, a lot of people in the West now want to do collabo with Nigerian artists. Why? Because it is what it is. All right, so those are things that we need to turn to real advantage and make sure that it percolates down through the economy and we're able to optimize the benefits that come from it. So for me, the entertainment industry is actually a lifesaver, and it's a lot of opportunities that I think the integrated marketing communications company can gain from it. So it's not just, oh, okay, we need influencers or it goes beyond that. It has to speak to a much more global audience and how you use that to set a new agenda.
Okay, great. That was absolutely well said. Now, let's talk about data. Now, how crucial is it to implement robust data governance policies, especially with, the witness of a cookieless era very soon? How crucial is it for us to implement a robust data governance policies?
I think it goes without saying that because the data speaks to, I think, to the what you can use to establish behavioral patterns. It's the reason why there's a lot of talk around regulation and the legalities around it. But we've also seen from experience in practical terms that these things are not always well fortified. So we've seen situations where data breaches around the globe mean very serious implication for consumers. So governments around the world, and especially in Nigeria, must take a very, very firm look at how to protect data, um, and not just pay lip service to it, because um, data speaks almost like the kind of algorithms that are able to generate behavioral patterns that also establishes why certain things should be initiated, a new product done this way, a new service done that way, so they can continue to mine the opportunities in consumer purchases and consumer habits. So data is life, data is the future. And then when you look at the increasingly technology orientation that we have, what data helps you to do is to plan and project even better and to predict behavioral patterns even better. And so you cut through the flesh, you save a lot because waste is reduced, and you can almost pinpoint with 100% accuracy how certain things will pan out. So hopefully this will complement things like the Internet of Things, the generative AI revolution that's ongoing, and be able to help us serve communities even more and
Okay.
better.
Okay, great. So let me ask, how do you think marketeers can embrace a responsible approach, not only in safeguarding trust with consumers, but also in paving the way for sustainable, ethical, AI-powered marketing practices?
Well, I mean, there's a collaboration that needs to happen in that respect. And I think it's generally understood that Africa is increasingly getting late to using AI to frontline a lot of our initiatives. So it's very important that we not only fully understand the implication of AI, but also the advantages that we can benefit from it, using organic approaches that speaks to our own orientation as Africans. But the collaboration in it also stems from the fact that regulation around AI is quite difficult, and that's the honest truth. So there's a moral to it and there's an ethic to it. And the moral and ethic also need to speak to the need for self-regulation. So when you talk about things around copyright issues, around plagiarism, all these things play out because um, you know people generally love the easy way out. So because you think you can use AI to do almost anything, including copy other people's works, then um, it takes away the uniqueness and originality that you might be looking for. And it might be the case that at some point things might be same of same because you're just adapting and readapting from the same core. But if your mindset is to use AI in such an optimized way that helps to enable, empower, and make better your own original thoughts, then it becomes a lot more powerful and a lot more instructive in the way it's going to impact people across board. And that's why I talked about the collaboration. But all said, the greatest responsibility for regulating AI rests with government. That's indeed every technology. Like we spoke about data, it rests with the government. But the question to ask is that is the government structure in itself in a way that they can manage these things, in a way that they can take advantage of it in such a way that it will benefit the economy. I'm not too sure that we're in that space yet because I don't even get the sense and there's a full understanding of what AI is and what it does and what it can do for the economy by extension. So the priority for the Ministry of Science and Technology and so on and so forth should actually be in how we can use technology for good, And if you look at that as an overriding theme, it means that all the subset of what can come through, whether it's AI, whether it's AR, augmented reality, whether it's digital, everything will then speak to the fact that we are using technology for good, which will be for the betterment of the life of a majority of our people.
Okay, great. So let me ask a question about marketeers. Now, how do you think marketeers can understand the complexities of the Nigerian market, such as, we have the cultural differences and the unique consumer behaviors?
There's no other way but to keep a tab on the market. There's no other way. Um, there's just no other way. And certain things will never grow out of fashion, to be honest with you. I always say to people, when I used to be very active as a client service director, I always insist on market visits. Because when you do market visit, and I'm not talking market visit that people do these days virtually. I'm talking market visit that you actually go to an Ojuwe, you go to an Okearin, you go to Martins, you go to places. Yeah, so you actually see what's changing and what's new, because those are the landing spots if anything new is going to emerge. From new products that are coming through to what people are buying, even to what people might be sabotaging or what they might be spinning off. That's the place where you will know. That's the place where you get first-hand information about what really goes into the market. And the reason is simple. Some of these markets are the places where wholesales are done and then redistributed to different retail outlets and different markets and all of that stuff. So keeping tab on what's going on in the market has to do with the fact that you're able to keep your ears close to the ground. Your ears close to the ground means that you have to be in the market, know the market, smell the market, feel the market, see the market, interact with the market, hear what people are saying. A lot of the guys who operate those markets are very savvy. They will never sell or bring in anything that's not likely to sell. They will never import things that are not likely to sell. They will never patronize a product that they are hesitant about. If they are, then it means that they have other reasons for why that should happen. So we can't be second guessing, in terms of what the market is saying. But beyond, the physical markets, you also can understand trends from where people are interacting with different retail orientations and different sales outlets. Because again, what you find with that is that how people buy, how people take purchase decisions differ. And many times these are due to economic conditions, they are due to locational issues, they are due to purchasing power, they are due to understanding of what the benefits of what they want to do will be. So when you understand their minds, or at least the way their minds are working, they are likely to be able to profile solutions that will sync with their expectations. And so what it means is that there will be less waste in terms of your targeting, either through media or through your sales strategy, or to that extent through your experiential orientation.
Okay, great. So let me ask, how would you compare the business side of advertising and marketing space in Nigeria to that of other clients in terms of regulations?
Okay, so my own little experience that it differs from market to market. I'll tell you what. Until the recent past, I was president of International Advertising Association in Nigeria, and I also was a global VP for new market development. And what I experienced showed is that in other markets in Africa, Ghana, South Africa, I think Mauritius and Egypt, Kenya, the level of regulation that we have in Nigeria is not as heightened in some of those markets. And they were actually looking forward to sharing our experiences with them. And I did actually initiate the process where Akon, as represented by the CEO, was able to interface with some of these global audiences, especially when it comes to regulation. Excuse me. So I'll say that regulation is something that's growing on many governments. And as consumer awareness rises, the need for regulation also rises. Um, but in terms of ethical orientation, it differs from market to market. There are some markets that are not as daring as we have in our market, which has made regulation inevitable. If I go beyond Nigeria to the West, of course, I think in many of the countries in the West, they have much more established regulatory patterns in how things are done. But regulation in its own, on itself, will not make things or make better things happen. What regulation needs to be effective will be in the kind of sanctions or um, in the kind of sanctions and in the kind of carrot and stick that they use to be able to make sure that people do what needs to be done. All right. There will always be resistance to things that are ethical, especially if it comes from the government. But when you consider that there needs to be a police, quote and unquote, for the entire that takes care of the interests um, of the entire consumer footprint, then it becomes inevitable for government to act its part. So for me, Nigeria is not doing badly. Africa is not doing badly. We are very forward-looking when it comes to regulations. Um, but what I think is also important is that what we need to focus on in terms of organic behavior will differ from place to place. The things that we find offensive in Nigeria are not necessarily offensive in the West. The things that are offensive in Asia are not necessarily offensive in Nigeria. Yeah. So regulation must always take cognizance of that local orientation.
Okay, great. So it is rumored that some brands or some national brands are trying to push aside CMOs, for lack of confidence. Now, how can marketers change this new narrative to redeem their place?
Well, again, I like that maybe that should be rephrased. I don't think it's because they don't have confidence in CMOs. I think it's because of the changing landscape in terms of consumer habit. Okay. All right. So what you find is that increasingly there's a need to do away with middlemen in many situations. Why? Because technology has democratized a lot of those things. Even a lot of the offerings that we used to make as integrated marketing companies are already democratized. So you can reach the consumer directly. So if you then understand that technology can provide you the app to understand the consumer need and orientation, to understand the route to market better and whatever, to understand distribution. So you are saying to yourself, these are all the things that you need a CMO to do. But you can, with an app, work all of these things out. In actual, you can also outsource these things to other people. So you just focus on the end market. So I don't think it's because they don't have confidence in the CMOs. I think it's because those roles are changing based on the dynamics of the market itself. So again, my one would be, can we reassess the job description so that you are not just looking for a CMO, you're also looking for somebody who has a much more versatile helicopter ability to do a lot more. It's just like having a basic degree these days is no longer tenable. You have to be able to have skills beyond just having a degree that is just a qualification. And what that guarantees is that you're able to bring a lot more to the table in your understanding of the market, in your understanding of the consumer, in the understanding of the expectations that everybody has or the aspirations that everybody has, so that when you sit around the table, everybody's expectations are more or less met significantly. So CMOs might become increasingly a very a diminishing whatever, but I think it's more because the roles they play are changing, not because they are incompetent as individuals. But of course, like I said, what it also speaks to is that as the market changes, the role, the job description, the role, even the KPIs that you have for all of these people needs to change, and the kind of skills that's required also needs to change. Yeah.
Okay, so I remember that earlier when we spoke about the new year, you mentioned optimism. So I want to ask, what is your projection for the first quarter of the year for the industry?
I need us to be very careful because again, it's very easy to get into that fold where you just make projections out of the cuff and, they are not based on strong rationales. And again, I think the question to ask is also that why do you want to make projections based on quarter one or quarter two or 1 month or 2 months? It's a challenge in the sense that our environment, I don't think, is structured where your projections can be based on established parameters. Why do I say so? This is an economy that's also still largely dependent on on budget appropriation. So yes, the Senate struggled to approve the budget on the last Saturday in 2023. But the same government has also granted an extension for 2023 budget to be extended, I think, till March or something. That's number one. Bear in mind that the government is still the largest spender, and when you look at what generates and inspires and motivates commerce, it's really going to be prompted by the government. This same government that's supposed to generate this, all right, in all practical intents and purposes, is broke. And even the projection for the 2024 that they've mentioned, that they've talked about, there's a significant deficit that's already envisaged, and how to fund it remains a big challenge. So, if I reflect on the fact that marketing communication depends on the bigger macroeconomy to be able to survive, and I've mentioned all of these things. So when I talk about projection for quarter one, I think it's pretty obvious that nothing significant is likely to happen because the budget itself is, yes, approved, is not fully implemented. The power to be able to push it and implement it has to do with fiscal solvency, which is not there. The government itself is still grappling with a lot of the fundamentals, the FX regime that we talked about, issues around security, issues around electricity. I'm part now of a confectionery company that spends between 500 and 900,000 on diesel every week. And I always say there's no amount of income that you generate, no amount of turnover you generate. When you spend close to 4 million naira on diesel every month, you are just burning the money away. Okay. So I go back to your question when you talk about the expectation for quarter one. It's not the Eldorado. I don't want to just talk about a figure of the curve when the indices are clear that there's still going to be a lot of challenge. I think what quarter one will help us to do is to be able to take proper stock of where we're coming from and to be able to rightfully focus our lenses on what are the likely areas this year where things will come from. And that would be that we do it significantly to an extent that we are taking out government involvement to some extent. We cannot do it fully, totally, but to some extent. So I'm unable to mention figures. I just say, at best, we look forward with optimism, with bated optimism, but we take stock of the reality and expect that things are not going to change radically overnight. If you're able to provide power, and I can guarantee that 70%, 80% of this country can have power, let me even say 50% of the time, then I can start telling you what will happen. It goes about commerce. If you can guarantee security that, okay, I want to go to Abuja, I want to go to Jos to play to, and I'm not psyching myself that do I really need to go, and so on and so forth, then, can start talking about, so everything is restrictive and restricted. And so that extent makes projection very difficult.
You're right, sir. I've heard someone say that I guess the reason why we pray a lot in Nigeria is because we don't have some things in place that some people don't pray as much as we do just because they have those things in place.
Absolutely.
Imagine you're going home and you have to pray that there is power supply at home when it's supposed to just be there. I guess with this, we cannot even expect a projection for the advertising ad spend for the year.
I think if we try to do that, to be honest with you. I mean, we can try. We can say, okay, last year we did X amount. Maybe this year, based on broad parameters and principles, we can add this to it. But I honestly don't. I don't think it's a useful venture to always engage in when it's clear that the principles that can help you establish something to the nearest decimal is missing. And in this case, it's not there. If you're able to guarantee electricity, if you're able to guarantee security to some extent, if you're able to guarantee the kind of infrastructure that makes business happen, if you're able to guarantee a stable FX regime, I guarantee you, then it's easy to be able to say, you know what, in 2 months, in 3 months, this is what will happen.
Let us talk about VZ. Now, tell our viewers about an overview of your company's offerings and how it stand out, knowing very well that there is a stiff competition out there.
All right. So when we started about 16, 17 years ago, what we did was to try and establish what the market needs, and that from the basis of of our offerings. So we didn't start out like your classic advertising company, because almost anybody can offer advertising. Anybody can, even then, everybody can offer copy and all of that. But three things that stood out was that whatever solutions people are looking for must be on time. So because you're talking about speed to market, not just route to market, whatever people are talking about or what they need must also be on budget. Because at the end of the day, everything, no matter how brilliant your ideas are, must always be something that can be operated within a reasonable budget. So we always bear that in mind in terms of cost effectiveness. And of course, the third thing is also the issue of strategy. What strategy does for you is that it helps you to plan and project, not just for the now, but for the medium and to the long term. So fundamentally, we are driven by what we call Autobus, which is on time, on budget, and on strategy. And that still hasn't changed, on time, on budget, on strategy. If you're on time, it means that no matter how brilliant what you're doing is, it means a certain requisition that helps that product or service to get to the market on time. Because again, you have situations where you have very brilliant ideas, but you are late to the party. On budget, of course, means that again you are within the confines of what can make it work. And the strategy means that you're not just thinking of the now, you are thinking of a much well-established route that makes the whole idea around that product or service sustainable and relatable. And that's all been our mantra. But we also realize that what people need more are like business partners rather than just solution providers. Because again, end to end, many people are able to balkanize some of these solutions and say, we do this, we do this, we do this. But when you're a partner, what you're able to do is not just to be able to make a diagnostics and also make a prescription, but you're also able to do some level of hand-holding. Now, the hand-holding is always the most difficult part because most often than not, the track sometimes that you suggest is unbeaten, it's untaken, and it's difficult to sustain, it's difficult to navigate. And that's where we tend to come in. So what we've done over the years is to be able to combine all of this and to make sure that we focus more on building relationships and not building transactions. Transactions can come and go. And of course, there are one or two situations where you just do something for people and then, they leave. But when you build relationships, what they are doing is that we are focusing on values. And when you focus on values, what it means is that those values remain constant even if the specifics of the offerings change. But the values are always time-tested and always extended for extended periods of time.
Okay, great. So I know you said that you didn't start out as a classy advertising agency.
Classic advertising
Yeah.
agency.
So, but what was VZ's corporate mission and vision at the inception?
Again, we try not to, we do have a vision, we do have a mission, which we have also retooled, I think, once or twice. But right now, our vision basically is to create values for those who, value, we bring value to those who appreciate value. So whatever your values are in terms of your business position and orientation, that's what we try to do. But in greater terms, in terms of the mission, it's really about business transformation. Again, we're looking at what is timeless. And what this helps us to do is to aggregate everything, that the interplay between the nexus of being a classic advertising agency, whether you're designing a corporate material, you're writing copy, you're doing media strategy, PR, or whatever, to what you need to be able to position properly in the minds of people, that makes you much more resonant and sustainable from a content point of view. So for us, it's really about business transformation when it comes to the mission. And we also now realize that because we play an increasing global role, our restriction is not just to Nigeria. So in fact, when we started, within a couple of years, we had operations across West Africa. And we also see our partnerships, strategic ones, across different places in Africa. What we have realized increasingly is that in many of those places, you do not need to have boots on ground in terms of your operations, but you need to have collaborations and partnerships, sometimes that are project focused or project initiated. But in more recent past, a lot of our efforts have gone into content, designing content, producing content, warehousing content for different clients. It's a slow burn in the sense that, again, from the classic advertising perspective, that's not what you're called to do. But from the relativity of a lot of the things that we've done in the past, it's always been about that. Some people might do it better because that's what they started and are recognized for. But because the value that you bring that surrounds the building of that content is a lot more than just what people see and consume. There's a strategy behind it. So yours is a lot more enduring. So it might come out as an event, might come out as a lifestyle product, might come out as an experiential, whatever it is, that the way it comes out, we are best suited not just to initiate that idea, but also to execute it with the right partners and collaboration in place.
Great. So talking about clients, partners, and collaborations now, what are some of the landmark campaigns and clients managed and executed by VZ?
So if you check back in history, we have never had to talk about clients. We have never had to talk about campaigns. And again, the understanding from that is that, do you go to a KPMG, to an Arthur Anderson, to a McKinsey and say, oh, so please tell us some of your clients. And then they'll start telling you, oh, that I work for this, work for this, work for this. No. It will only come out as part of a process of expression of interest that's confidential between you and that client. So that consulting orientation we've always had from day one. So if people see and know the clients that we work with and work for, then that's fine. But we are not one to now start saying to, oh, so yes, I work for Nigerian Breweries, or I work for First Bank, or I work for GT Bank, or I work for Fidelity Bank. It's not likely to happen, because the more respectable consulting organizations are not treated that way.
Okay. In short form, let's say VZ does not want to blow its own trumpet.
I don't think it's just about wanting to blow your own trumpet. I think it's about the depth of understanding that you have in the value that you bring to the table. And that value doesn't have to do. So the same way that you say, oh, I have this as a client, when they move on, you also come to announce to the world that they moved on. And they do have a right to move on. But if you go back to the issue of value, it should be that clients can come and go, but the value that established the relationship that you have between you and them remains evergreen. That's the way that we see it. And, if you also understand the dynamics of client-agency relationship, there's many things that regulate it. But what we try always to focus on will be the strength of the characterization that we bring to that relationship that's based on value. So you are not likely, number one, you're not likely to take on a client or a responsibility um, that we do not respect. And what it means to that extent that even where we need to part ways in that relationship, it's not only mutual, was born out of respect for each other. So you're not likely to have heard us talk about a client or a relationship that headed south so much that it becomes an acrimony. No. We always modify our expectations when it comes to that. And we always want to guard those relationships very, very jealously. Um, is it an industry-wide practice? The answer is probably no. Is it a notion that is always fully respected? Well, probably it's not. It's a mixed bag, but that's the way we have chosen to do our own business.
Okay, great. So let's move from VZ to who is Dr. Tunji Olugbodi. Our viewers would like to know.
I'm just somebody who tries to do his best on a day-to-day basis and operating with a set of principles that I think has guided me over the years. And just to do my own little modest, my own modest contribution to the growth of the business, to the growth of the nation. So um, I have a multidisciplinary orientation. I've always been that way. Um, when I started out as a career, I started in media. I started out as a journalist with The Guardian, and then I went into copywriting, and then I went into client service, and I went into strategy, and the rest is history.
Okay, I mentioned earlier that VZ does not want to blow its trumpet. I think it's a personal thing because I know that you are a super client service manager and a very savvy creative professional. Now, I want to know, or our viewers would like to know, how is this two attributes, how has it helped you navigate the landmines so much that you have achieved so much success?
I think one is the discipline of rigor. I'll say that clearly, discipline of rigor. When I started out at the Guardian, accidentally my story with the Guardian is quite funny. I actually started out as a freelance when I was in the university. I was in 200 level when I came into contact with the Guardian, and so I started as a correspondent, even as a student. So by the time I graduated and I finished service, I wanted to actually go back to the university as a lecturer, but one or two things happened. The university wasn't very enthusiastic in having people like me back because I was also very active in the students' union. So I just found myself at the Guardian. Now, the interesting thing at the Guardian was I was both a reporter, I was covering the judicial bit, and I was also working on the sub desk. Now, what you do on the sub desk is that you are the one that prepares stories. So you write the stories, you write the headlines, you make it more compact, you fill in all the details and so on and so forth, and then you plan the pages. And that's what I was doing at the Guardian. So I was actually doing two jobs for the price of one. It stretched me considerably, but it also gave me a lot of experience. Now, when you're a sub-editor, it's about the discipline of brevity, writing headlines, writing stories, just few short paragraphs that people like, and then writing with speed. All right, like I always say, it was where I was taught that no matter how good your story is, no matter how exclusive your story is, if you don't write it early enough and turn it out in time for it to be published, then other people will have published it before you get to the street. And in publishing yours, you also must have a unique angle to the story you are telling. So I think all of this helped in my formative years to be able to focus on the discipline of creativity and the discipline of diligence. So even today, when people send me stuff, I'm in the eye of my mind, I can easily pick errors in the sentence. I can pick spelling, grammar errors. I can anticipate what's to come, because when you also work in production, it's about deadlines. All right, so the paper must go to bed at a particular time so that they can print it. And when they print, then it comes out for it to be distributed. And those are the days we're talking about physical distribution of newspapers, where you have to physically put them in distribution vans and they drive them all over the country. So And many times I'm actually part of that distribution. A few times I've also driven with those guys just to have the experience. And it's quite interesting. So for me, it's always about that speed. It's always about that creativity, that discipline to rigor. And I think it really does, it did help me. So by the time I became a copywriter, I think it reflected very much in the things that I did. And then much later on, when you talk then about the business orientation, it's also that you are able to build capacity to be able to anticipate things. So I'm not one that looks at a decision or looks at a problem or a challenge and I'm lost. I'm never lost. When I have a challenge or a situation, a lot of my guys over the years know I'm a plan A, plan B, plan C person. I will never be caught unaware. I'm never one to throw my hands up and say, so what do we do next? We have to be able to do something next. And so it's the way that I've trained myself. So challenges will come, problems will come, but there must always be a way out. It might not be the best, but if your orientation is a solutions-driven one, you'd find out that you will never be left in the cul-de-sac and nobody's likely to be able to take you for a ride. So the way you interface with people, the way you negotiate with people, the way the way you draw your expectations from people must be clear and firm. So when you are dealing with me, what you see was what you get. We're all clear about what's mutually beneficial to both of us, and I expect you to deliver 101%, the same way that I expect that you will expect that I should also facilitate for you. I've been in client situations where clients make certain demands that I didn't think was reasonable, and I insisted, even as a very junior person, and I insisted that that's not the way to go. She went to report me to the higher authorities, and decided to take the account away. I wasn't moved. So this was an incident in Promosa many years ago, that was 1989 or so. And I had a client who was part of a shoot. I was a very junior person. She was part of a shoot. And every time when we were doing that TV commercial, we took our comments in. I specifically requested for our comments on every single item. So when we were ready with the commercial and we presented it to them, she just said, I don't like it. So what don't you like? She just said, I don't like it. I said, what do you, boy, you were part of the shoot. You approved the script every step of the way you are. So if you don't like it, we can understand, but it won't be that you just don't like it. There will be things that you don't like that can be improved. You said, I just don't like it. I said, well, I'm sorry, you cannot say that because you are part of this shoot. And then, she became very upset. She said this meeting was over and that I should leave. I said, I'm not leaving until I say the meeting is closed because I'm the one that I've come to deliver. And, she was very, very upset. We became very good friends afterwards. So she went to report me that I was being obnoxious and so on and so forth. And in truth, even her own people said, but yes, you were part of the shoot, so how can you just say you don't like it? What are the things you don't like? Eventually we reached a compromise, and she even went to report me to her husband. So I met the husband at the social function. I said, so you are the social and so, and I've been disturbing my wife. So, but I think the point for me is really that you have to be principled about some of these things that you do. People have to understand what you bring to the table, and it has to be something that's of value to everyone, so you're not just wasting people's time.
Great. So how did you move from a value-added, or how did you move from a value-adding or value-added employee to being a successful agency or a successful agency owner?
Well, the truth is that there's no formula for it. And for a long time, I'll be honest with you, I was very, very reluctant in starting any organization. And the reason was simply that I had been part of organizations. I had been part of a particular organization that was very, very successful, and I was part of that success, very, very, and I can boldly say I was very much part of that whole success, instrumental to that success. So in my mind, I was always saying to myself, you can't create anything new better than this that you've done. But when I needed to move on, it became clear that I had to challenge myself. And challenging myself is about creating new value streams and new principles by which you want to operate. Because the market is only good to the extent of the new ideas that they bring into it. So for instance, I said to myself, okay, in starting this new thing, I'll be the only one that is new here. So all the people that I had worked with, that are people that have worked, that are comfortable and understand how I work, I didn't live with any one of them. I started with totally new people that I had never met before. Most of them, it was just by reputation. And all I had to sell to them was just the idea that, I have this idea that I will do this thing, this will do this thing there. So meeting them in lobbies of hotels and all of that, so I think most of them were stupid enough to buy into my vision. And they were just telling that, okay, all right, this sounds crazy enough, let's do it. And that was it, to be honest with you. So, and again, as client service director, what people tend to do is that they will leave with all the accounts they are working on. I know there was a very great concern to the company I was working for then, because I was working in extremely big accounts. One of the accounts was doing a turnover, but they were doing a fixed fee of over 187 million. This was as of 2004 to 2005. I mean, that was a lot of money then, so naturally they were concerned. But I decided, so first day I opened shop, I didn't have one single client. So I started from ground zero. Because if you are not challenging yourself that way, then what you'll be doing is to be to create a version of what had been. But when you challenge yourself like that and you have your back to the wall, you know that the only way to go is up. You do not have a choice. But like I said, the training for that has also come from the past, because I've had several opportunities to validate some of those things. Because in that place I was coming from too, we didn't have a client when we started day one. So I said to myself, I'm not going to cannibalize a place that I built and conveniently take away the clients, because I think it's the right thing to do. And so I think because we're able to do it that way, and because some people are stupid enough to have come with me, and we're able to then break through, and then I started hearing stories like, they've always had those kind of clients. They've always, most of the people that I met them for the first time. But they've also, when I'm even on the client side, many of them have become lifelong friends because of that relationship that I talked about. And I find situations time and again where people will come to say, if there's anybody that can do this for us, it is you. Or what do you think? Or what do you recommend? So some of the personal principles that I have actually manifest through this. Number one, there's no shortcut to anywhere that's worth going. And that's something that I always operate with all the time. There's no shortcut. If you want to get to somewhere meaningful, you have to go the whole hog. You have to, do it the hard way. Number two, what takes you there does not keep you there. Yorubas have a saying that Igbalani and Ikolode. What that means that you're only relevant for a point in time. So maybe the nuances and the things you bring to the table that people know of you that makes you relevant within that context. After a while, your season is gone. It's true. I mean, people come to prominence as football players, as musicians, as celebrities, but it's only for a season. Check it out. When they fade out, in fact, you don't even remember that they faded out. You just, at some point, we used to know this person. Or, like the footballers, like this footballer used to be the best. It used to be a season of Didier Drogba, a season of so, but they've all gone. You have younger people now. So your relevance is only to the extent of understanding that what takes you to that point does not keep you there. So if you want to remain relevant, again, it's about value. And that value will only be appreciated not by everyone, but by a certain coterie of people that know that there's a lot more to you than what you bring to the table. And the third thing for me really is about continuous improvement. There's absolutely no way you can rest on your oars. And continuous improvement is about always seeking to break new grounds. I happened to go to a secondary school where our motto was nothing ventured, nothing hard. And I took it to heart totally. That if you not venture, if you're afraid to venture, if you are too timid to venture, and you want to stay in a comfort zone, you will never be able to do anything worthwhile. So never be afraid to venture. If you fail, so be it. If you falter, so be it. But just learn that in that adventure, there will be many experiences that will benefit you. So nothing ventured, nothing hard. If you venture, there will always be something of benefit that comes through from it. So those are my principles.
Oh, great. So just before I let you go, now what are some of the iconic jingles that have remained memorable to you over the years?
funny enough, the jingles that I remain memorable to me, some of them are, many people in this age won't even remember them. And that's the truth. And most of these, when you talk about that very simple originality, that's what comes through for me all the time. And I used to talk about this in many advertising classes. I remember Gala, for instance. If I sing it, some people will say I'm very ras, but I thought it was done by Roosevelt.
Okay.
And I think it was Roosevelt. It was done in Yoruba, but it's one of the most effective gala that everybody can talk about.
You should sing it.
Ojúlówó tó yónú bẹ́ẹ̀ ni, bébí bá náwó gan ni, gala lẹ̀rọ̀ ebi lọ́gán bẹ́ẹ̀ ni, lẹ́nu iṣẹ́ ni ní ìrìn àjò gala ni, ojúlówó ẹran màálù làbí ṣe gala, lọ́mọdé pẹ̀ lágbà gala ni o. And they used like an apala.
Like Fuji already.
The Fuji thing. And I thought one of the most effective, and this is probably maybe 30 years later, and it's very, very effective. Some of the ones done by my late chairman, Prince Kehinde Adeosun, many in this generation can't relate with it. Bro 6. Ọmọdé yìí tó gbà àbúrò, ìyá ẹ̀ tó pa láyò. Bro 6 ni ó yànjú ẹ̀. Bro 6 ni ó fi gbéra sọ. And this were rendered in Yoruba, some in Pidgin. There's one to, it has to do with, not an Adin. I remember that too. But, those are the iconic ones that I remember. These days, because everything is synthesized and you can just get on the whatever and choose existing music, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
I'm sure you've brought smiles to some very to some of our viewers today. And just before I let you go, one last question: what would you say is your favorite industry mantra of all times?
Do I really have one? No, I don't have one. I try not to pigeonhole myself. I try not to pigeonhole myself. The same way that I approach the issue of mentorship. I'm not a one mentor person. I have several mentors that I just basically watch their lifestyle, watch their contribution, watch their orientation. So I'm not a one mantra person.
Okay, so if there was one mantra that you could leave us with, our viewers, what would that be?
I think I already mentioned it, to be honest with you. What takes you there does not keep you there. More than any other thing for me.
What takes you there does not keep you there.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely informative and educative speaking with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
And that's the much we can take on this week's episode of Marketing Edge on TV. Join us same time next week for another informative episode. I'm Olugbodi. Bye for now.